What's going on, Wolfpack? Welcome back to another episode of Market Watch Mondays. I am your host, forever and always, Mike Me Up with 2Ps on Twitter. Head on over there, drop me a follow, give me a shout out and holler at me if you want to talk football and talk shop. I'm always on there handling the business with people. It is Saturday, early Saturday morning. I apologize for the slither of sun on my face. Unfortunately, just where I'm seated in my office, the way it's set up, I have like this crack of sunlight that gets through, so it's hard for me to block out. Hopefully, to move headquarters, I'll make sure to get a nice dark ass room that only has unnatural lighting, so we don't have these problems ever again. But for now, you're just gonna have to bear with me. I'm sorry about that. Look, I'm excited. I spent this morning, took the homie girl, my dog, Clover, out for a walk, did some training. We're doing training with her now every week, ever since we got her back from the trainers. They basically have to do it like, it's kind of like, it's like muscle memory almost. You got to keep training. So my girlfriend and I have been taking her to the park, training all the time, and it's been good because she comes home now and she's super tired and exhausted mentally. So kind of like, what happens when you go on Twitter usually. It's like muscle memory. You just get into arguments, you get into debates, and then by the time you jump off Twitter, all you want to do is curl up in a ball on your couch and cry yourself to sleep. That's usually what happens after engaging on Twitter. But fortunately, that's not what happened yesterday. So I spent a little bit of time on the Bird app. Shout out to Still Ryan 5, guys over there at Roto Underworld, Breakout Finder with Ray GQ. If you guys don't follow them or don't listen to the pod, I highly encourage you to check it out. I don't listen to too many pods anymore, but I do listen to that one with Ray and Ryan. I think it's a pretty entertaining and pretty informative one as well. Super dig their vibe. But yeah, I've been using Bird app ever since I heard him use it. I'm like, that's genius. So I'm just taking that. I'm sorry, Ryan. Charge me a royalty or something. Send it to me, Venmo me, whatever you got to do it. But I'm gonna keep using it. But yeah, I was on the good old Bird app yesterday, just cruising. It's a nice Friday afternoon, and you normally expect the same bullshit, people crying, other people crying about people crying, and that's what you get. But there was some really good conversation yesterday, and it had a lot of really great minds that I personally respect a lot. It was started by Matt the Oracle from the guys over at the Action Network. Peter Howdy jumped in. JJ Zacharyson from Numberfire jumped in, who we had on the show, a friend of the pod. I'm gonna call everyone a friend of the pod as long as they show up once. So we got him coming on. We had Cooper, Cooper, who I'm big fan of. I've already been shouting him out for a while. We had. Who else? We had Jack Miller from RotoViz, Curtis Patrick from RotoViz. So it's just a great conversation. And what they were talking about was Terrace Marshall, a very divisive player in this class, but a very fast riser. If you guys have not been following along in his pro day, he lit the pro day up, much like all the other LSU players. So, you got to take that with a grain of salt, I guess. But he lit it up, man. He put up a RAS score, which is a relative athletic score, started by the guy over on Twitter. His name is @MathBomb. So if you don't follow him, please do. But basically, it takes a composite score of all of the relevant athletic metrics and then grades them out of 10. And Marshall scored like a 9.2 or something out of 10, which is extremely good. He obviously flew up draft boards. I think, even before that, I had him a little bit higher because based on the buzz that I was seeing from mainstream media, it did sound like he was someone that's going to get first-round draft capital. And he is someone that I liked, and he's someone that I made a contextual adjustment for. And the whole debate, I'll link the chain below in the comments, so make sure you check it out. But make sure you read it, because it's actually a lot of back and forth, and both sides come up with a lot of good points, and I'll kind of tell you where I stand. But basically the gist of it is Marshall didn't really break out right until his final junior year, which was this past year, and then he early declared for the NFL draft, which we know is a positive signal. But the debate is like, well, Peter Howdy, very brilliant analytical mind in fantasy football, is like, well, why are we making contextual adjustments for this guy? Because, JJ had him as his wide receiver 3, I believe, which is pretty high. It's a little bit higher than I have him, but it's pretty high. I think Matt, the Oracle, also had him really high. And pretty much most of the people that were in the comments had Marshall really high. And, their case for him was basically, look, like he played with some of the greatest teammates ever. He played with one of the greatest rookies since Randy Moss in Justin Jefferson, set the rookie receiving record. Justin Jefferson was playing second fiddle to Jamar Chase, who is probably one of the best wide receiver prospects to come out in the last half decade or so. That would be my guess. Probably the best you could probably make the case at least since Amari Cooper, if not earlier than that. So, the debate come down to like, well, Marshall didn't break out because he actually had a legitimate reason to. And also, if you guys don't remember, Marshall would have broken out in a big way. Well, he did technically break out if you look at the 20% threshold, but he would have broke out in a big way. We're talking like 30% plus threshold this year had he not opted out. Or at least that's the case that those like JJ and myself believe, because he was absolutely lighting it up for the first 7 games of the season, and then COVID, and then he opted out because he knew he was going to get probably high draft capital. And then, didn't play. So then obviously if you look at his total market share, not on a per game basis, then, it doesn't look that good. He just looks like a very average, 20% plus prospect that doesn't really break any lines, right? So look, the way I approach situations like this, like numbers is great, right? Like I come from everything. Like I start from a numbers perspective. The way my approach works is, look, I filter down the universe using numbers, right? And if you don't meet certain number thresholds, chances are I'm not going to have you ranked very highly. But it doesn't mean I do not look at them or investigate further or try and understand why were their numbers so bad. Like if the film community is so high on someone, there must be a reason, right? Like the film community, at least the ones that I trust and follow, the ones that know what the hell they're doing, not the self-proclaimed film scouts on Twitter, but the ones who I really, really respect and respect their work. When they say they're really high on someone, it makes me wonder, like, well, why didn't it show up on the numbers, right? So that's why I started digging. And for me, I tend to come out on this from the perspective of JJ. I know Peter Howdy does not think about per game metrics as very good, because if you look at his database and you filter by per game metrics, it doesn't necessarily boost his overall R squared, right? It doesn't boost the overall R squared of the entire population. But I do believe you have to look at each player kind of a little bit differently, because this is a very fickle game. This is a very, very high variance, high beta game, right? There is no such thing as all else being equal, right? That statement, we say it all the time, we try to say it all the time, but it doesn't really apply. There are no two players that are the same amount of talent. There are no two players on the same talented teams. There aren't the same amount of players that have the same play style. So you really got to look at these things and try and ask yourself, like, that's why I always use numbers as something to inform me. It's one piece of the puzzle, right? Numbers tell me where to look. It doesn't tell me how to make decisions. That's the best way that I can put it. And I think that's what most people do. I think that's what Peter does too. We just have different views and different approaches to things. So I like to look at per game metrics as long as they've played a decent amount of games. And to me, 7 games, more than half the season, is a decent sample size. And if you look at Terrace Marshall going back to his freshman and sophomore year, it's not like he was a bum, right? Like it's not like he didn't do anything. He was still in like the double-digit, teens and stuff like that when he was producing. If I remember correctly, don't quote me on those numbers. Maybe double check those. But he was producing. He just did not break out. And look, I think it's a little bit different when you're playing with one really good teammate versus multiple really good teammates, multiple first-round talents. And in his case, most likely multiple first-round talents that are actually really good hits in the NFL. Like, I don't put as much weight into the Alabama teammate argument, because we've seen what Alabama players have done in the NFL, and we've seen what Henry Ruggs has done, and it's clear that he is not a first-round talent, right? It's clear to me, at least, that he was overdrafted. Overdrafted compared to the wide receivers, overdrafted compared to the O-line, overdrafted compared to every single one. And he only got drafted because the Oakland Raiders are fucking terrible, and they're stupid, and all they do is draft speed, right? So I think it's fair to look at a player after they get to the NFL to determine how talented that wide receiver group really was, right? So that's why we can look back, when the people were trying to make the case for Henry Ruggs, the only example I could think of was the Clemson team, which had DeAndre Hopkins, which had, Sammy Watkins, right, which had Martavis Bryant. Like that was an equivalent scenario where we had two guys. And as much as people shit on Sammy Watkins, he was pretty good early on in his career. Injuries took over and what have you, and he's not that good anymore. But, he had put up like a 1K yard season as a rookie on a really, really bad Buffalo team. And he did put up some productive years, but not that good. Obviously, he didn't live up to the hype, but he was a very, very good player. And if you watched him in college, you knew he was a damn good player. Whereas when I watched Henry Ruggs in college, I'm like, he's fast. He's all right, I guess. But he's not that good. So I think it is important to take into account what players have done in the NFL. And we've now seen what Justin Jefferson has done in the NFL. And for most people, including myself, he is the dynasty wide receiver one. Not for most people, for a lot of people, right? He is the dynasty wide receiver one. So if you put things in that context for someone like a Terrace Marshall, it kind of makes sense why he wasn't able to break out. He was playing with two really, really, really good wide receivers. And even while playing with them, even though he didn't break out, he still produced to a degree. And then as soon as they departed, he balled out. For the first 7 games, I mean, Terrace Marshall's rocking like a 50% dominator, right? So, and it's not like he was also playing with a bum, right? He was playing with Keyshawn Boutte, who is my dynasty wide receiver 1 for the 2023 class. I just drafted him in the next level Devi draft. Shout out to Drew Ozenchuk, another friend of the pod, who is the commissioner of that league and started it. Your boy's the defending champ, so I'm going to try and go back to back and hopefully, try and roll into 3 wins and get that rolling pot. That's my goal. But, once Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson are gone, Terrace Marshall blew up, and he's still playing with a really, really good young wide receiver talent. So it's not really an excuse, right? If you look at him compared to a Henry Ruggs, I think Henry Ruggs, it was an excuse. Like Henry Ruggs, first of all, he never broke out, so that's like a very big difference right there. And Henry Ruggs was always about excuses about him not really performing because of, he had Jerry Jeudy, he had, Devon, he had so many first-round wide receivers, whereas we don't really know if those first-round wide receivers are worthy of a first-round pick. We don't really know if a Devontae Smith is going to be worth that pick. We don't, like Jerry Jeudy, he's good. Should he have been a first-round pick? I don't know. I'm in on him at his current cost, and I'm trying to grab him on a lot of my teams, but did he deserve to go, that high in the draft? I don't think so, okay? So, we have these examples of that, and, what we see is, I think the LSU team, if you can make one time, you can make a contextual adjustment for someone, I think it makes sense to make it for someone like a Terrace Marshall, because we truly just have not seen too many instances like this. And that's the problem, right? That's the problem with trying to apply a broad historical portfolio to just one situation. And, that's what we try to do in analytics. We're trying to play the odds, right? At the end of the day, I'm not here telling you to move Terrace Marshall into your top 3, because I'm still going to take, Rashad Bateman, who has less holes, and I'm still going to take Jamar Chase or whatever. But I do think it's important to contextualize why he performed the way that he did, and to understand, or at least to come to the realization that there really hasn't been any cases that we can think of that look like this. And the closest thing I'm going to go back to again is still the Clemson team, where they had Sammy Watkins and DeAndre Hopkins and Martavis Bryant. And Martavis Bryant kind of never broke out. And, who knows what he would have done in the NFL. He looked pretty good while he was playing, for sure. But then, obviously, he smoked too much weed and he got booted by the NFL, which is still ridiculous. But, that's what happened. So if we compare to that situation, Terrace Marshall really did better than that. And I'm a fan of using per game adjustments to kind of help us understand what a player's ceiling can be, right? In the games that are active, here's what they did. And I've used that before already. If you guys have been following along on the channel, I made that same type of adjustment to try and help myself understand and justify where I have Jalen Waddle in my ranks, right? I have him as a top 5 wide receiver, just ahead of Terrace Marshall. A strong case could be made that Terrace Marshall could be ahead of him, just based on his size, based on his versatility, based on his upside. I haven't made it yet. We're going to see where they land and what draft capital they get, but Jalen Waddle to me is a very similar thing. When I look back at Jalen Waddle, it's an even smaller sample size, right? It's only 4 games. But in those 4 games, Jalen Waddle outproduced Devonta Smith. Important piece of context there after talking to Angelo is that obviously Devonta Smith was the one that was pulling the top cornerback of every single opposing defense. So that allowed Jalen Waddle to succeed. Now, from a fantasy perspective, that is not as important to me, because if Jalen Waddle has that same type of outlook, so what I'll be looking for is him landing on a team with another very established alpha that can help him develop into that role. So if that happens, I'm still going to be very high, very in on Jalen Waddle. But from a talent perspective, from a film perspective, I think Jalen Waddle is incredible as well. But I made a similar type of adjustment. I said, look, if we look at the games that he played, Jalen Waddle was a freaking beast, right? He outproduced Devonta Smith. Who knows what would have happened? Would Devonta Smith have won the Heisman if Jalen Waddle continued to play? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Who the fuck knows? We don't want to play if and ands. As Snacks would say, if my aunt had balls, she'd be my uncle. So we can talk about that shit all day. But what we can see from these per game adjustments, and if you look back, I think someone this applied to was like a DK Metcalf, right? DK Metcalf, if you look at him from a total market share perspective, he didn't really look that great because he was hurt and he missed games. But if you look at it on a per game basis, he was actually pretty damn good. And DK Metcalf was someone that people said, like, look, his ceiling is very, very high, but he could potentially have a lot lower floor in terms of his range of outcomes. And what happened? He landed in the right situation with the right quarterback that played to his elite skills, and now he's a top 3 dynasty wide receiver. So that's why it's important. So I think it's important to take in context that piece along with trying to figure out if they fit where they're going, right? If Jalen Waddle goes to a place that's an anemic offense that has no idea how to use him, am I going to be very excited about him? Probably not, right? But if he goes to an offense like the Green Bay Packers, they probably pick too late, so they're probably not going to land him. But if he goes to like an LA Chargers, for example, with a Justin Herbert who throws an absolutely beautiful deep ball, who has Keenan Allen that can work the underneath as well, that can be a great balance, would I be excited? Yes, right? Because, if you land in a great situation and you're tied to a great quarterback, that's kind of good for your outlook. So I think, with guys like this, we recognize that they're a higher risk, right? I don't think anybody in that thread was saying, well, look, Terrace Marshall has a safer floor than Rashad Bateman, or Terrace Marshall has a safer floor than Jamar Chase, right? That's not the case. I think people recognize that he has that risk because of those flags, but they're able to contextualize why some of those flags exist. Now, for me, does that mean we completely erase the flags? No, because I'm not saying that if Terrace Marshall played all 14 games, it's a guarantee that he would have had 50% dominated, right? He's going to have down games and have up games. The more games you play, the larger sample size you have. But what I am saying is, in those 7 games that he did play, he showed us what he could be. Now, whether or not he can be that for a prolonged period of time, that is the risk, right? That is the flag. And I'm fully recognizing that risk. But when it comes to wide receivers, especially in that range, man, in that late, where he's going to be going, which is the late first, early second range, you're going to be chasing upside, because when it comes to wide receivers, man, wide receiver like 15 to 30, like, they're a dime a dozen. Wide receivers just do not matter, right? Unless you're able to find guys that you can hit on that upside. And this brings it back to everything I've been talking about, is we need to think about everything in terms of expected value, not just hit rate, right? Hit rate alone is a good piece of information. And, the homie from Fantasy and Chill, he put out a tweet yesterday, and I can engage with him back and forth. Another good conversation. He said, hit rates are trash. And look, I don't think hit rates are trash, but I think the way that people use it is very misleading, right? Everyone touts their model having like, oh, they've hit a top 24 season, and that's the percentage hit. And that's great and all, right? That's great and all. But the key piece is missing there, which Charles brought up, which is great, is time, right? If they hit that, 4 years, 5 years down the road, that's not really relevant anymore. You want to look for hits in the first couple of years. And secondly, the part that I've been talking about is impact, right? How big of an impact is that hit worth? Is hitting a top 24 wide receiver worth more than hitting a top 12 running back? Hell no. And we talked about that before when we talked about James Robinson. That's why I was able to swing on him. I was fine swinging on him, because even though he's a lower percentage chance of hitting, if he hits, the impact on my team is much, much larger. And that's how we think about some of these wide receivers. When I look at a Jalen Waddle, when I look at when I look at a Terrace Marshall, right? If they hit, the percentage of hitting is definitely lower than someone like a Jamar Chase, Rashad Bateman. I absolutely admit that, right? And we can all admit that. But maybe the impact of him hitting is higher than the impact of a Rondale Moore hitting. Maybe a Terrace Marshall hitting an alpha wide receiver means he could be a top six wide receiver in the league and make a bigger impact on your team. Now, is that very subjective? Like, it's very hard to quantify impact. I don't think anyone has really come up with a great way to quantify impact. I will say JJ Zacharyson from Number Fire, he put out a great article last year of trying to quantify what a league winner means. We hear that term all the time. We want to chase league winners. But what does it really mean? And he tried to look at basically the point drop-off within positional groups and where the largest drop-offs were. And I think that's a good way to look at it. For me, I just try and think about it more as like a qualitative contextual point. Do they profile someone that can be an alpha wide receiver that plays on the outside, plays on the inside, can move all around the field? Do they profile as more of a slot receiver, kind of like an Elijah Moore, Rondale Moore, where they're more fixed to a certain role? Doesn't mean they're not valuable. It just means that they don't typically have that type of top 5 upside that an AJ Brown or a DK Metcalf would, right? Or a Devontae Adams, for example. They hit it sometimes, like Juju Smith-Schuster was a top 5 wide receiver as a slot receiver, but it's more rare, right? So that's kind of how I really approach this problem. I'm more on the side of JJ and some of those folks. But JJ himself said he doesn't use per game stats. I use that as a way to look at things. I kind of just look at it and say like, hey, like let me try and understand why the numbers are where they're at. And that's what I do for the class. And is that perfect? I don't know, but that's kind of just my process, and it's worked for me so far. I think, I'll see what comes out of this class. And the thing that makes this class so interesting about that tier 2 of wide receivers is everyone has holes, right? Like everyone you could qualify as an outlier. It just depends on what type of outlier do you want. Like Rondale Moore is a size outlier at 5'7". Like really nobody has really succeeded at that size, but also, his historic freshman year production and, just beast of an athlete. I comped him to Ant-Man, and, Player Profiler has him as Ant-Man up there too, but it's like, pick your poison, right? Are you a size guy? Are you a production guy? Are you a missed games guy? Are you an early declare guy? Are you a senior guy? Are you a BMI guy? Like, everyone has holes you can poke in their profile. Like, even Rashad Bateman, we were expecting him to come in at 210, 215, which is a listed weight on the Sports Reference site. But he came on himself on a show and said, I've never been above 200. Even him, doesn't really have that type of alpha size that we thought he would have. So there's a lot of holes for a lot of these wide receivers. But it doesn't mean that the prospects are not good, right? You just gotta make sure you're focusing on the right things. And I hear a lot of people say now, like, oh wow, like rookie picks aren't worth much anymore. Like you can buy low on rookie picks. Like the second round picks ain't what they used to be. I disagree. Like I think the second round picks are still good. Now I think the class is not as top heavy as we thought. Like there aren't as many bona fide studs, right? But there's still a lot of really, really good prospects. Like if you think about last year, T. Higgins wasn't a bona fide stud, right? Laviska Shenault was not a bona fide stud, but I was a really big fan of them. That's why they were going in the early second round, because they were still really good prospects, right? They had some question marks, right? T. Higgins, people were worried because he ran really slow on his pro day. He skipped the combine and all that stuff. But you know what? Turns out he was really damn good. And I think we're going to find some of those gems in this class. You just got to make sure you're focused on the right things, right? You got to focus on production. College production, at the end of the day, nothing matters more than collegiate production. And I think that's the agreement that everyone here is coming from. They just have different views on how to approach and how to view that production in the case like a Jalen Waddle, in the case of a Terrace Marshall in this instance. Like, is Terrace Marshall an outlier if he hits? To me, maybe, but he wouldn't be as big of an outlier hitting as Henry Ruggs. Like, Henry Ruggs is not the same as Terrace Marshall. Henry Ruggs is not the same as Jalen Waddle. And that may sound confusing to some of you guys. For someone like me who approaches the game from an analytics basis, it's like, well, how can you say they're not the same when the numbers suggest they're the same? And to me, it's just about applying contextual adjustments. And look, if you don't want to do that, that's a totally fair approach. Just take the analytics lens and just be like, okay, look, these guys are screening out of my process, and I'm just not going to touch them because they're low odd hits, historically speaking. For me, I'm willing to swing a little bit on that upside. And it just comes back to my whole approach of trying to think about stuff in terms of expected value, right? Like, where do I think the expected value of some of these guys can be from an impact perspective? And it's a little bit of a soft approach because we don't have a great way to identify it. But if you're drafting wide receivers, man, you want wide receivers that have that top 5, top 10 upside, that actually have that points per game differential that matters to your team, right? And so that's kind of how I approach it. But it's a really, really, really good conversation. I strongly encourage all of you to go in there and check it out. I will link it in the comments below for all you guys to see so you guys can check it out. But, it was a lot of great minds, a lot of good chatter, and I had a good time following it. But I just wanted to kind of share my thoughts on the situation. It's an interesting time, right? We're about a month away from the NFL draft, and aside from Jamar Chase, being locked in as a wide receiver one, for most people, there's still some out there, some doubters that, maybe have, Jalen Waddle or Devonta Smith or Rashad Bateman or whatever. For me, it's no question. It's Jamar Chase. We're going to see where he lands. Probably top 10 draft pick. No holes in his game. But that second tier of wide receivers, man, there is a lot of discussion. For me, I have Rashad Bateman in his own second tier still. So I'm talking about the third tier of wide receivers. I'm talking about the Devonta Smiths, the Jalen Waddles, the Terrace Marshalls, the Rondale Moores, the De'Ami Browns even. Some of the guys have him up there. So, it's a really interesting conversation in that second group. To me, it's going to be – what that means is you're going to be able to get a lot of value in the second round. So That's also why I still like second round picks, to be honest. And, other people might be pivoting off. I'm still on. I still really like where those guys are landing. And you got to remember, look, come the draft time, there's going to be guys that are reaching for running backs, and they're going to push people down. People are going to take Truba Hubbard in the first round. I know it. It's going to happen. People are going to take Trey Sermon in the first round. When they see the top running backs dry up and they're like, damn, my team needs a running back. Let me reach on this guy. Don't make that mistake. If you are a follower of me, if you are a Patreon member, if you are a part of the Wolf Pack, please do not make that mistake. Do not reach for subpar running back profiles in the late first, early second when you have really, really good wide receiver profiles still available. Now, these guys may have some holes, but that does not make them bad profiles. It just means there's some things that you have to consider, and they have some risk to them. But who does not have any risk, right? You draft in the first round, doesn't matter who you are, unless you're Jamar Chase, who still has risk. He has the least amount of risk, but still has risk. Everyone has risk. Everyone has flex. So, like I said, it's a matter of pick your poison. I think there's going to be a ton of value in that early to mid-second round because people are going to reach for running backs. They always do. They always reach for a Devin Singletary. They always reach for a Keyshawn Vaughn. It happens every single year. A Darrell Henderson. Like, everyone always reaches for running backs. Because, for me, if you're going to reach for one of the top three, right? Reach early for a running back so that you can get value later at wide receiver. Do not reach later and then take wide receiver early. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. So, that's kind of my approach. It's going to be an interesting time. Make sure you guys capture that value. Make sure you guys trade back, man. When you're in that last part of the first round, the later part of the first round, I think there's going to be opportunities to trade into the second and still get your guys because people are going to be reaching for running backs. And it happens every single year. And because it's so unclear, right? Obviously, do your own research in your league, but it's so unclear. There really is no consensus of how the wide receiver, wide receiver 2 to 10 goes. Like, it's all over the place. I've seen rankings all over the place. And I'm sure mine is very different from someone else's. But because there's that type of variation, that's when you can kind of find value. When it's super defined, kind of like how it was last year, it's really hard to kind of get value unless you're ahead of the game, right? And T. Higgins and Laviska Shenault are going to be good. But aside from that, it's hard to get ahead of the game. Now, because there's so much uncertainty, even in my own takes, I have less certainty in my rankings this year than I did last year because, naturally there's less information, there's more red flags, there's more holes in the game, so there's more assumptions that you have to make, there's more context that you have to apply to the numbers, there's more room for error. So, I'm going to be honest, I'm less comfortable with my rankings this year than I was last year. And I was super comfortable with my rankings last year, and my rankings last year turned out to be pretty damn good. But we'll see how it goes. But, at the end of the day, man, take everything in stride, right? Make your own decisions, right? That's the key. There is no worse feeling than losing on someone else's pick because you did not have the confidence to go for your own, right? And, do I believe in my rankings? Absolutely. Do I think you should do my rankings? Absolutely. Do I think my rankings are one of the best rankings out there? Absolutely. If I didn't, I would not be selling it as a product. But at the end of the day, take my rankings, take ADP, and then apply your own judgment, right? This is the game, right? If you just want to draft by someone else's rankings, man, fucking put on auto draft, load my rankings up, and don't even play, right? That's not the point. The point is to take my rankings, see where you agree, see where you disagree, apply your own context, apply your own adjustments, and then play from there. Win and lose by your own hand. Live by the sword, die by the sword, right? I always say that. I put out hot takes. I don't really put out hot takes much. When I put out a take that's hot, it's just because I disagree with the majority. And when I hit, but when I lose, I own up to it. So, again, just live by the sword, die by the sword, all right? Make your own decisions, man. There's nothing going to be fun about just listening to everyone else and letting the echo chamber influence your own decisions. And then next year, you're like, damn, man, I really like that guy, but I didn't draft him because Mike said not to. Don't be that guy. Just don't do that. If you freaking think Devonta Smith is wide receiver 1, go for it. I think it's ill-advised, but go for it. At least you have the information from me, and then you said you thought about it. I forced you to think about it. That's my goal, right? My goal is not to tell you what to do. My goal here in this show is to show you what I do, how I got there, how I think about things, and then you can take that, internalize it, be like, does that make sense? Yeah, that does make sense. Or no, that doesn't make sense. I disagree. And then make your own adjustments. That is my goal from you being on the channel, from all the Patreons in the Wolf Pack. I want you guys to learn to think for yourself. Now, I think the Dynasty community and Dynasty strategy is very saturated but not very creative, which is why I'm sharing the ways that I learn and the way that I think, because I think there's a lot of edge to be gained because people are very stale, right? That's why I'm sharing it. But when it comes to rankings, when it comes to players, have some conviction in your own ranks. Have some conviction in your own players, in your own thoughts, right? You don't always have to listen to me or Ray or Matthew Berry. I don't give a fuck who it is, right? I don't care which analyst it is. At the end of the day, think for yourself, right? Think for yourself, make decisions that way, and you will have a much, much better time doing it. Now, do I think you should be following me, following some of my advice? Absolutely, right? And that's why I want you guys on the friggin' Wolfpack Patreon, man. We're at 200 members in the Discord. We're at 220 or something on the Patreon. So there's some people that still aren't in the Discord. I don't know who they are. I'm trying to hunt them down because that's where all the magic happens. But if you have not joined yet, I promise you this, man. You are going to love the product, right? It is a great community. I'm really loving the members that we have. You know, we're growing steadily and solidly. You know, on there, you're going to find my ranks on a monthly basis. You're going to have, depending on what tier you're in, if you're in the killer tier, you're only going to get the NFL players. So my NFL Superflex rankings with rookies by position, by tier, that travels across tiers, so you know how to trade position for position, right? You're going to get that. And then if you're in the alpha tier, you're also going to get my Devy ranks. And I think this is the only one that I've seen out there where Devy players are combined with NFL players. So, you know, if you are in a Devy draft, it really helps you contextualize and think about where to take the Devy players, how I value them, the things I take into consideration there. So that's the main piece there, is the ranks you're going to get there. But you're also going to get a monthly stream. I have the stream with the Patrons later on today where I get them to ask questions and, you know, address their stuff. You're going to get a chance to get prizes. Last week I selected 3 people for a free audit of any team that they want. So I'm going to go in, grade their team, look at everyone in the league, come up with trades for them, come up with stuff like that, you know, give them their strengths, weaknesses, players to go after, types of trades to go after, you know, best trade partners in the league and all things of that sort. So look, there's a lot of stuff happening in the Patreon, and I'm constantly thinking in my brain of how else to bring value to my Patreon members in the Wolfpack. So if you are a hardcore Dynasty player, I cannot stress this enough. I do truly believe this. This will be the best bang for your buck out there anywhere, bar none. I promise you that. And if you're disappointed, let me know. I'm always open to feedback. It's a great community. There's people in there right now that are taking my ranks and like building sheets with ADP, you know, building trade value calculators with each other and sharing it amongst the community. It's awesome. It's totally awesome, man. I cannot stress this enough. This is exactly what I wanted to do when I started that community. Is I wanted to have a bunch of hardcore Dynasty gamers that didn't just take my word as gospel, that thought for themselves and then, you know, added and contributed to the conversation with each other. And that's exactly what we have, and it's super exciting. So patreon.com/ourpack. Head on over there. Make sure you're a member. Hop on in there. I'm looking forward to welcome y'all in there and hopefully jump into discussions with us, look into my ranks, you know, poke holes in my ranks, ask me questions, challenge me, challenge each other. That's what we're all about, man. I just cannot stress enough. I love every single one of y'all in there. Those of you who have supported me from the jump, appreciate you. Those of you who supported our channel on the YouTube, appreciate you as well. And then again, you know, if you're not that hardcore of a Dynasty gamer, if you want something more casual, something more fun, make sure you hop in the BDG Discord, right? I just hopped in there yesterday, set up a couple bots for that channel as well. And it's bumping too, man. It's a different vibe. You know, talking like margaritas, you're talking working out, you're talking stonks, just different types of products. You know, here at BDG, we're trying to cater to a bunch of different audiences at the end of the day. So find the one that's right for you. I promise you there's something in there that's right for you. And then lastly, make sure y'all check out the draft guide. Noah, Nick, myself grinded hard on that shit, making the player profiles for you. We're going to be writing articles. I'm going to be writing strategy articles. I'm going to be adding a new article this year. It's going to be how to do a rebuild. You know, I've done videos on it before, but I think, you know, in article format, similar to how I did the Bible, it'll probably be another piece of the Bible, you know, on startup strategy, you know, how I do rebuilds. I'm going to add that as maybe like part 3 or something like that. I'm still thinking about it, but, you know, stay tuned, man. There's going to be a lot of content coming out there. So head on over to the BDG site. I'll link that below in the comments as well, and you'll see a bunch of products on there. And if you are a Patreon member of the Wolfpack, you will get 20% off the draft guide. All right. So step 1, go on to patreon.com/rpack, sign up for the Wolfpack. And then step 2, go to the site, get the draft guide, 20% off. Easy money, man. Easy money, great product, and I promise you, you will not regret it, man. We are grinding hard at Big Dogs to get you guys everything you need. All right, So that's all I got for you guys this week. Hopefully y'all enjoyed. If you did, hit the thumbs up, hit the subscribe, hit the notification, the little bell, so you know when I'm posting new videos. Noah's putting out fire content on rookies as always. Some of the best short form, no, not some of, the best short form content on the interwebs today. I stake my goddamn name on that, all right? Make sure you guys check that out. Highly entertaining. Super informative. I watch every single one when it comes out. It's pretty hype. I mean, Noah's getting fucking good at that shit, man. I'm not gonna lie. This dude, if he starts creating videos for like, for main television one day, I'm not gonna be surprised. But hopefully, stays with the big dogs. So the big dog's gonna be a main brand one day too. Y'all know what it is. All right, that's all I got for you. Happy weekend, or I guess not happy weekend because it'll be Monday. Hope you guys have a good week. Good start to the week. Get that grind early. Stay fit. Stay sharp. Stay strong. All right. See you guys next week on another episode of Market Watch Mondays. Peace out.